finally have you on. We've been trying to do this for, I think, like a year now, but just like pandemic
Yeah.
and everything got in the way. So I am very happy to see your face. I'm very happy to actually start working with you in the new year. And I have gotten so much feedback about my own weight loss journey that made me really uncomfortable. And I felt like it would be better to have someone who can speak to these things from a more informed space, come
Mhm.
on here and talk to my audience about it. So I'm going to let you tell my audience who you are, what you do, and why.
So my name is Shana Spence. I am a registered dietitian based in Brooklyn. And I like to kind of call myself like an eat everything or anything dietitian. I think it's just super important because food is often, um, I'll just say a lot of foods are stigmatized or demonized. So it's really just important to get that message out there, especially looking at the media. I think people always assume they're not eating things they should be eating or too much of things or whatever the case is. And I think sometimes that does more damage to our bodies because of the stress than actual food eating. So I think it's just really important for people to know that. I also tell or explain to people that I like to come from a haze perspective, which means health at every size. Because oftentimes we also think that the smaller we get or the smaller we are, the better. And that's not necessarily the case as well. So that's all my perspective. That's how I'm coming in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the Instagram algorithm was that led me to your Instagram page, but I found your perspective so soothing because of the
Oh,
way that diet culture has kind of trained our minds to perceive food and just this mindset that we're always kind of doing something wrong in terms of
hmm.
how we eat. One thing about your story that I found really interesting, we both have a fashion background. So I was wondering what exactly about the industry just made you like, what was your final straw where you were just like, I can't be a part of this shit anymore?
Yeah, it's just very, and don't get me wrong, like I think fashion honestly is because I do have like a creative outlet as well. So I don't think that it's like a dumb or, I'm using quotation marks here, field. I think that fashion designers are artists. Like I say that all the time. I think it's super important. However, I just found maybe the companies I was working for toxic. I'm not going to name them. And I also found the people I was working with at the time, and just my personality just didn't fit. So I think it just wasn't for me. And I like to say that just to point out, because I do have friends that are still working there and they're doing fine. But also, I think it was just me wanting to find a different career, but a career that I felt like I could actually help people in, or I felt like I was being can't describe it. Like it's not the best way to say like used appropriately or whatever you want to put it, but I just felt like I'd be more useful somewhere else. And I got into nutrition simply for the wrong reasons. Actually, I went into it for the wrong reasons at first because I was very much still like, oh, I eat like super healthy and I can help people like eat healthy too and be like really thin and like also had disordered eating, so I thought I was like the clean, superfood outlook. And so that's why I did originally get into it, which is not good. And then it really did take my own research and realizing this isn't the best way to present things. This isn't helpful. And that's sort of how I like slowly transitioned into the dietitian that I am today. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think for me, fashion, working in fashion, I realized that I'm not cut out to be on the corporate side of things. Cause
Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
I was like, I'm in the wrong place,
Yeah.
building time. Like,
That's how I felt like every day for
yeah,
8 years.
I think I had like the first inkling was like my very first like internship.
Uh-huh.
And this girl, and I still routinely pray that I don't run into her. This girl yelled in my face, and I tell this story all the time, but it was like Kill Bill sirens went off. And I didn't realize that I was going to run into that girl was like an avatar for every kind of girl that I run into. And I
Mhm.
was just like, I might need to get out of corporate fashion because my ass gonna end up in jail. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way I'm not gonna
It's so
slap
true.
the shit out of somebody. So I still definitely, have the creative outlet of it, but it was like corporate fashion is just nope. So
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
love that you have the haze perspective on things. Like on your website, you're very clear about like your approach to
Mhm.
things. So my friends and I who are trying to unlearn diet culture, we're trying to understand fat phobia a little bit more, but we still hit these walls because of how we've been socialized, right? Where it's like it doesn't sound right. So
Mhm.
to our untrained mind, health at any size sounds like, oh, just eat whatever you want. But this is a more sustainable approach to nutritional wellness overall. Can you explain like why that is a more sustainable approach versus
Mhm.
what we've been taught about keto, paleo, cut carbs, do this, do that, do this? Why is
Mhm.
this a more sustainable approach?
I think just when you're told not to do something, I feel like the body or your mind just has a natural rebellious mindset to it. Like I always use the example of being a teenager. Like when your parents told you not to do something, no matter what it was, you're like, well, I'm going to do it now that you told me not to, And I feel like that kind of carries through, you know, when with all of these diets, it's always a list of foods that you cannot eat, right? So of course your mind is going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't eat this." So you're constantly thinking about that very food. Like maybe you weren't thinking about, I don't know, potato chips before, right? Like maybe that was not in your mindset, but just seeing that you can't have them, that's what you're going to be thinking about. So it's sort of that's kind of the example I always use when I'm saying like things aren't sustainable because there's nothing wrong with having that, you know, not everyone's going to just constantly eat out of the bag all the time, unless you're restricting. So I always say it's really more sustainable to be able to eat everything, I always also put that, you aren't allergic to or intolerant to or anything like that, because that always comes up. I have a lot of allergies too, so I understand. But it's really important to know that, you know what, I can have these things once in a while, or I can, allow myself the freedom to choose, and no one's saying, I just want to also clear up, no one's saying not to eat vegetables, because that's the thing. Like people will always go back to that. It's like, oh, you're telling people to just like eat cookies all day. It's like, no, I'm actually not saying that. Because sometimes our body does say, you know what, that salad looks good. That's perfectly fine too. It's just allowing yourself the freedom. And when you really do give yourself permission, it's more sustainable, because all of those other diets just are giving you lists of foods not to eat, and it's not specific to your body. Like, if you have celiac disease, yes, definitely stay away from gluten. But for those of us who, yeah, but the thing is that gluten is often demonized, even though people don't have celiac disease. So
I
it's like,
get so frustrated with, "Oh, I don't do gluten," and I'm always like, "Oh, why is that?" "Oh, you
yeah,
know, okay,"
exactly.
and I'm like, Do you have celiac disease?" And they're like, "Well, what
Yeah,
is that?" And I'm like, "Well, it's
there
an
you go.
actual condition where you shouldn't have gluten." And they
Right.
why are you cutting this out? I think that, like, there's too much information about
Hmm.
things that are actually you can't paint with a broad brush. Like, everything doesn't apply to everybody. Example, I had a friend tell me she was having, like, some vaginal issues, and I'm like that person who my friends know, like, "You can ask me anything."
Hmm.
And she told me, like, "Yeah, so I stopped using tampons." I was like, "Oh, were the tampons giving you a yeast infection?" And she's like,
Hmm.
"Well, no, but I did." Like, one of my friends, like, completely talked me out of using tampons anymore because they said they cause infertility. I said, "Bitch, do you think that is?"
No.
I said, did you find a correlation or a connection between like your vagina and tampons? Well, no, they never bothered me. So why are you inconveniencing yourself? And I think we
Yeah,
do this with diet a lot as well. And it stresses me out. Cause
it's
I'm like,
very
I know
frustrating.
you
Mm,
must also be frustrated that you're just like, oh, do you have a gluten-free bun? Like everywhere you go. Girl,
yeah,
have some regular
yeah.
bread. Like it's not gonna even if it
Exactly.
impacts you. What I
Yeah.
realized too, when I first reached out to you to work with you, I also at the same time had gone in for my physical and I got this insulin resistance diagnosis. And at the same time, I also started mindful self compassion with my therapist, right?
Mhm.
So before getting that diagnosis and getting on meds and pre this part of my journey, I would always think like if I let myself quote unquote have like one whatever, I'm gonna just like clear the bag. Like I will eat a sleeve of Oreos. Now before
Mhm.
that diagnosis, yes, I would. Got the diagnosis, got on meds, whatever, and I had a just an intense craving for a bagel. I don't even
Mhm.
like bagels. They're too chewy, take too long to chew 'em, whatever. That's when, like, my pre-brain was like, "Go get a bag of bagels." I allowed myself to have, like, 1 or 2 of them, I think, like, with the cream cheese, with whatever, and the rest of those bagels are still sitting in there. So, said that to say, like, allowing yourself the kindness to be a human who has, like, a craving is not
Mhm.
going to derail your whole shit unless you have like a biological like what I had, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm always kind of trying to get people to the other side of like, well, what's true for you? And so for you
Mhm.
as a this is what you do. You're trained in this. Do you not struggle to break that in people where it's like you'll be fine, I promise. Just be nice to
Yeah.
yourself?
Mhm. It's scary, and I get it, because they oftentimes people and everyone has different reasonings, but I think that we always want to see the results physically in ourselves, and I feel like people are scared, you know um like whenever we talk about even exercise, like people want to see the results, and I think not seeing the results of something is frightening for people.
Yeah.
um and a lot of times eating, like we're told, oh, if you eat the correct way, if you eat perfectly, you're going to see the results, right? And that's still ingrained in people's minds. And so it's scary to be told, how about not doing that? How about trying something where, you know what, you'll feel better, which I think should be the goal, but people are still very much into this physical transformation, and I think that that's why it's like scary for people. Or, and oftentimes it's this new concept. Let's be honest. Like if you open any magazine now, or well, I'm so old school, so I guess like reading online, like the kids don't do that anymore with magazines, but like anything you look at, it's often told like what to eat, or like even in the magazines that are now claiming to be like more inclusive, I still see like things geared towards clean eating, or like calling things superfoods, or you know keto sometimes gets slipped in there where it'll be like keto friendly a recipe or something like that. So I think that it's still very hard to let go of. Like we know that we're like in the right direction, but it's just like that final like, hey, let's try something new, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's scary for people, and it's frustrating, but also I definitely have empathy,
Yeah.
it's because I understand like society is just pushing me back, it's just hard to undo.
Yeah, and I think too, we don't for whatever reason, we don't really like a simple answer. We want like a quick
Hmm.
fix, but we also don't want a simple answer. And
Oh,
your
totally.
yeah, your approach to things is really just be kinder to yourself. Like, like
Mhm.
we really want to beat ourselves into submission. And
It's
that's
true, we want rules,
yes,
rules, yeah.
we want the strictness of that. So
Mhm.
again, I'm really trying to better understand fat phobia and I keep seeing some really questionable things online where it's
Mhm.
like, well, going to the gym is fat phobic. And I'm like, that don't sound right to me. Or,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
be certain that where you do start other practices, like I have gotten to the point where like I'm really afraid to post like before and after photos because I don't want to perpetuate fat phobia in this way. And it's starting to kind of like circular thinking to me in the bigger conversation online about fat
Mhm.
phobia. where it's like, it sounds like you're telling people that, not you specifically, but that
Mhm.
community is telling people that they are wrong for damn near doing anything that could, even as a byproduct, result in weight
Mhm.
loss. So I guess my question is, when is it okay, quote unquote, or healthy, or is it ever healthy or okay to desire weight loss or to have an aesthetic desire for your body? Because I'm honestly kind of confused, and I always want to be
Mhm.
careful about the content that I put out. I don't want to be harmful. I don't, want to add to that story, but it's like, is it not okay for me to want my personal desires for my body? And that
Mhm.
part I'm a little bit mixed up on.
Yeah, it's hard because, like weight loss is, it's kind of interesting you say that because a lot of times people will say, "Oh, you're anti-weight loss." And it's just like, no, like people lose weight all the time. It's not anti, I'm like not anti anything except like dieting.
Yeah.
But I always talk about intentional weight loss. Like that's the difference. So weight loss can happen, and that's what Haze is actually about, excuse me, is when we say we're not going to talk about weight as a behavior, meaning whatever your goals are. Like, let's say you want more energy, right? Like, wanting more energy and weight loss are two separate things. So we can say, oh, like maybe it's how you're eating. Because a lot of times we just look at the food. We don't look at, are you actually eating enough during the day? Are you eating like consistently? Are you drinking enough water? That's always a big one. Are you drinking
No
enough water?
one is
Oftentimes, no.
ever drinking enough water,
Exactly.
ever.
That's always the one that gets people. They're like, oh, okay. Sleep, right? Like those are big ones. So, weight, if you do all those things and are actually like, exercise is great. Like I am a big proponent of movement in general. Like whatever you like to do, if it's like lifting, if it's doing that really hard hit class or whatever, like that's great. And yes, sometimes you might lose weight, but I think people get caught up with intentional weight loss because we're getting to an arbitrary number, right? And yes, like you can definitely go to the doctor, don't get me wrong, and they'll tell you a lot of bullshit too, because doctors sometimes do perpetuate that stigma as well. So
Yeah.
they might give you a number. However, our bodies are different, right? Like I think that body diversity is something that we don't look at enough of. And I talk about being like a kid in school when we learn about like, people come in like different colors and hair colors and all this stuff. We never learn about different bodies, and I think that's super, super important to, really teach the kids now. But yeah, I think like there's a difference between weight loss, which can happen for sure, because our bodies fluctuate too. And intentional weight loss, meaning you're trying to contort your body into a size or get to a number that it might not be programmed to get to, and that's, I think that's the difference. So, before and after pictures, and I used to learn this too. Like at first I thought, everyone can do whatever they want to, but sometimes I think that before and after, you always have to think, well, someone's, it's great to celebrate whatever your goals are, but your like before picture might be someone's like now. And I think that's the thing to be careful of, like telling people, well, you shouldn't look like this. Like, it depends on the messaging, like everything is nuanced. And I don't think it necessarily means people are bad people or anything like that. But I think that's what I'm learning too, because I'm still learning as well. And I think that's the messaging behind before and after pictures. Because yeah, like if you are like getting stronger by doing all these classes or whatever you're doing, like yeah, you want to celebrate that. So maybe just be like, look at, just posting a picture of yourself now and being like, I just made it through like the whole hour of this class, like why the before picture? So that's sort of my take on it. Again, I'm not saying if you do before and after you're wrong, but that's just my opinion from what I'm learning still too. But that's sort of the messaging. Fat phobia is, it's hard because it's around us. We're still learning it from doctors, from TV, right? Like you turn on the TV and like the fat person is still like the joke of the series, and it's like, So it's a lot to undo. It's a lot to
Yeah, and
undo.
to your point, I think we are like we're very clearly actively learning about it
Mhm.
as it's happening. But I found I was so troubled by the feedback that Lizzo got from that community
Oh,
where it was like,
yeah, I did too.
yeah,
Yeah,
they felt
I
abandoned by her because she'd had like a weekend and a moment where she
yeah.
just did not feel good about her body, and said that she wanted to do a detox, which I definitely want you to share your
Mhm.
perspective on detoxes as well, because the number of times that I have been like, bitch, your kidney works, you're fine. um
Yeah.
um I felt so badly for her because they didn't give her permission to have a moment of not
Mhm.
even weakness, but just of humanity. Like, she's on a much bigger stage than any other fat person in the world. So the things that she encounters are going to hit her differently than we are.
Mhm.
And I don't know, some of the messaging and the responses and I was so troubled by that. It's like, I think people need to have permission to feel how they feel about their body. And that can go, on any part of the spectrum, but who are you to tell someone that their moment is
Mhm.
negative, just, super negatively. That some girl
Mhm.
was like, I was gonna get a Lizzo tattoo, but no longer. And it's like, why were
Oh
you
my god.
on you
Why?
anyway, weirdo? Like, calm down.
Yeah.
So
Well, my thing, yeah.
yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say my thing with that is just that, who she never said that she was like leading the body, like whatever movement, so it's just that I think people saw someone, she has this confidence, she has this like insane amount of talent, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, like it's natural to be like, I want to be like her, like she's my idol or whatever. And she never said, I am, going to be this fat activist, I'm going to be this, she was literally just living her life, like, getting her Grammys or whatever, and playing the flute on stage, which I still am just like, how are you doing that? But that's what she was doing. She never claimed to be like, the leader of this movement, nor did Adele, because that's another one who's getting so much flack now. And I'm like, you need to stop putting these women, especially I feel like, especially like Black women, you need to stop putting them in these roles that they didn't sign up for, you know. Like, so that's my issue with that. And I think that that's what made me annoyed, really, because it was just a lot of complaining from people who are like, you were my idol, and it's just like, she never asked to be, though, like she was literally just like living her life. Like, do I agree with the methods? No, but like, she's still amazing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
she
yeah,
didn't ask to do that, so yeah.
yeah. You have a really great perspective on detoxing, and my friends are always
Hmm.
telling me, "Oh, girl, I'm gonna start a detox on Monday
Oh
because I
god.
did it." And I'm like, "What are you detoxing from? Why do you feel like your liver and kidney aren't working
Mm,
properly? Like, what do you mean by that?" It's like that thing of like, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Please break down like why
yeah.
detoxes are a farce and a tool of capitalism.
Yeah, it's just like, it's so mind-boggling to me, because I think the word detox, like, it's something that has gone, it's just one of those words that like the wellness and diet culture has just taken like control of. And honestly, like, detoxing is getting rid of, right, the toxins in your body. And guess what? Like, your body does that already. I think people, the problem is that we are constantly made to believe, and the more I do, the more I speak about it, the more it's like making me realize that we just are told not to trust our bodies. We're being led to believe that we shouldn't trust our bodies. That's what it comes down to, right? Like, if you have a craving, not to trust it. If you are hungry at like a weird time, not to trust that. Like, we're just told not to trust our body. The same thing with detoxing. Like, okay, you had, I don't know, like a burger and fries, right? Like something, and you're not feeling great after because maybe it was too much or whatever have you. And then people are like, okay, I need to detox from it. It's like, no, actually, your body has these really great organs, right? They have this really great set of organs that does that for you. And I say most people because, I always get this where it's like, some people don't have that. It's like, okay, but yes, but like, Let's be
We're
honest, like
obviously not
a lot of
talking
people do.
about those people. We're obviously
Always
not
going to be a
talking
troll.
about those people. God.
There's always going to be a troll. And let's be honest, if you aren't born with that, you already know what to do. And it still doesn't involve celery juice. Like, let's just be clear. Let's just be clear. Even if you aren't born with kidneys, or if you like whatever, you're still not doing celery juice. So I don't even care about that argument. Anyway, um, but yes, so your organs do that for you. And the thing is that our bodies have a really great way of resetting. So it's not to get all sciencey, but there's something called homeostasis, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that. And we think of temperature regulation, which is true, but it's also a way of getting our body back to our set point. So that also includes things like our internal system, getting rid of the toxins, like even like let's say you drink too much, right? Like, like you don't need to do like a crazy, you just need to balance it with water, right? You don't have to do all the crazy celery juice and all of that. It's really just your body, like trusting your body in order to get to that reset, and it will happen. You don't need things like the kale juice or the celery juice. If you are drinking that, I hope it's because you like the taste. I don't know who likes the taste of celery juice, but if you do, fine. But that it's not needed is my point.
Yeah, I think too, I had so many people DM me asking me like, "Oh
Mhm.
my God, what have you been doing? Like, what's your meal plan? What's your this and what's your that?" Meanwhile, I had done so much content around this total, wellness as a whole journey. And I'm like, nobody cared about what I was saying until I lost like 50
Mhm.
pounds.
Mhm.
And yeah, like we don't believe that people know what they're talking about until we see, like you said, the result. And I
Mhm.
felt, number one, I felt guilty because I felt like I have a level of privilege that I should not have as a person who weighs less. I do not like the word thin because I'm from the South and I
Mhm.
don't like skin. I don't like being called skinny. I don't like that at all because I'm still very much a thick girl. But anyway, that's all another conversation for another day. But I felt so guilty because now people are paying attention. Now people want to engage with my content. Now people are like, "Oh, well, where's the video where you talked about this?" And if I were a less honest person, the way that I could
Mhm.
have just sold people a bunch of stuff as like, this is my workout plan, this is what I ate, and this is what I drank. And I was horrified that that's how people got, that there is
Mhm.
this deep need and desire for people to just be thinner, to weigh less, to be smaller than there is to be well. And so, what
Mhm.
I've been telling people is like, well, first go to your doctor. And the number of people who are like, oh, I've never thought about that. It's your body. Why aren't you talking to your doctor? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I just get like my annual pap smear and like that's it for me. And I'm like, you don't get blood work done. You don't, whatever, whatever. Like, I take full advantage of my health
Mhm.
insurance. And I recognize that that's a privilege, but if I feel bad, like when I got to a certain point on the scale, my body felt bad. My lower back
Mhm.
hurt, my hips hurt, my knees hurt. Like I'm 5'2", I can't weigh this much. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I talked to my doctor about that, and that was that journey for me. And so I want for more of us to have an understanding that it has to be a total thing. It can't just be, I want a small waist and a flat stomach and a big
Mhm.
butt. Okay, say you get that. What after that though? Do you
Mhm.
feel good? Um, it stresses me out that we have so much to unlearn. But even with that being said, one of the things that you talk about too is our concept of the nutrition of different kinds of food. We think that things
Mhm.
that are packaged, canned, processed aren't quote unquote good, aren't quote unquote nutritious. Can you talk a little bit about why it's just as fine. It's just as okay to have like a frozen
Mhm.
vegetable as one that you got from Whole Foods that cost $13. Like,
Yeah, that's probably exactly how much it costs too.
yeah.
Like, honestly, I think it just comes down to, again, like a lot of the media now. We always think of like something fresh as better. And I just tell people, if you prefer the taste, that's fine. But you have to understand, as far as saying something is healthier or more nutritious, it's not true. And I think it's also wording. A lot of times you'll see companies advertise that they're like non-GMO, and the word is scary to people, right? Like genetically modified. Oh my God. And it's just like, it sounds scary, but when you realize, oh, like the actual crops that are GMOs are like not a lot. I think they're 11. And even the way we do it now, it's just like we need to, because we have a large amount of people to feed. Like, I don't think people realize like that's why we do the things we do, right? Like there's a reason that food science is actually a really important aspect of things, and a lot of the things we eat, it requires food science and it requires something like GMOs, right? And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't, you're still getting nutrition. You're still, and the same thing with canned food, right? We think of it as less nutritious, like, oh my gosh, I got this from a shelf. Yes, you did. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's just like, if you're worried about, sometimes the sodium content is higher, which is totally fine. But guess what? You can do something that I always suggest is rinsing it out, if that's a concern to you, and it will still be fine. Because I'll never forget this one client. She felt so guilty because she preferred, she had access financially and store wise to the fresh green beans or whatever, but she's like, I like really like the taste of the canned. And I was just like, that's fine. And I think she was just in shock that I said that, because she wanted like ways to try to avoid the can. I was like, why would I tell you not to have canned like food? So that's one of the things that's also very hard to undo. Like, we're just constantly thinking fresh is best, and it's like, no, fresh is a preferred taste, right? That's fine if you prefer the taste, but there's nothing wrong with and frozen too. Frozen actually sometimes is better, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty, because it's like picked at like the peak of its whatever the term is. So that's why sometimes people are like, it's better. But it's not going to be advertised as better or whatever, because it, oh my gosh, it came from the freezer. Like, so, so
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to that perception of like, oh, I feel like I'm about to just be like so woo woo about it, but just like the way that we associate like poverty with canned
oh,
goods,
totally.
and people feel
Totally.
like being poor, not having a lot of money is a moral failure, and also being overweight is a moral failure, and also being unhealthy is a moral failure. So if you do all those things, if you're in all those pockets, then you are somehow a bad person. So don't do what the bad people tend to
Hmm.
need to do, which is to eat. And it's like none of that is true.
That's exactly the explanation. Exactly it.
None of that shit is true. Um, so I at the top of the year again, which is when this part of my journey started. And I was talking with my doctor, who is a woman of color, and that was what really actually made the difference for me, because I had been seeing another physician in the practice who really, I can't even remember what drug she wanted to give me for weight loss, but I have several friends who are pharmacists, and they were like, bitch, don't take that. That's not what that's, so like, don't do that. But this is also like an Upper East Side kind of situation. I
uh,
think is one of those where it's just like, girl, here's some drugs. There's some drugs at it. But the South Asian woman who I saw in the practice was like, you're gaining weight quite consistently, and I don't think that you're actually being honest with yourself about how active you are. You are
hmm.
quite active. You should not be gaining weight at this rate. Your family health history is this and this and this. Let's consider this. So she sent me to an endocrinologist, and that was how that part of things got started. But at a point in between seeing the endocrinologist and seeing her, because it was quite about like a month wait. You know how it is, like when a
Hmm.
doctor's really good, it's hard to get in them. So my doctor
Hmm.
was like, in the interim, try Noom. And she's like, I've had so many, patients who've really had success with Noom. And I was on Noom hitting a brick wall where I was like, this is not, and I'm in the groups and it's like the information that they were giving, I was like, oh, this is all really interesting and whatever. And I'm trying really hard. And I'm like, this is not doing a damn thing for me. And it's not
Mhm.
cheap either. So when I saw your content around like these different weight loss apps, I felt so seen. I was like, oh, thank God. I thought I was the only person who wasn't quote unquote having success with this or whatever.
Mhm.
So what exactly is it about the weight loss apps that you, I don't want to say are against, but that give you pause or that.
Yeah. Well, they're not individualized. You're just putting a generic um number, you're entering numbers into the app, right? And it's still not individualized. So they're going to tell you, okay, this is what you should, I'm using quotations, weigh. And that's again not right for everybody. So that's my number one problem with it. Number two is that it's going to give you what I call starvation numbers, because it's so bizarre to me how we think of like the perfect amount of calories as like 1500 or something like that, or will see like what celebrities eat and it's like, oh, it totals like 1600. And I'm just, I don't think people realize that's the amount kids eat, right? Kids who are like 3 feet tall, right? That's how much they eat. And it looks like we are bigger, larger adults. So, or most of us again, right? So we just need to like remember that. I think I posted something yesterday and I'm getting so many messages. People didn't realize like 1200 calories. That's what we give toddlers, you know? And a lot of times people on the apps are being told to eat even less. Someone told me that they were given 850 calories. That's starvation.
Oh my God.
That's complete starvation. And, it doesn't matter if and I see this also from, people in like the weight management field or like dietitians who are in the weight management. They're just like, yeah, but like it's not the calories, it's what you're telling people to eat, and that's still bullshit. Because let's say you eat all the fibrous foods that will feel full to you, 800 calories is still 800 calories. That's not going to be sustainable. Like, yeah, you can eat like all this broccoli, which will probably not feel great afterwards in your stomach, but that's not going to be sustainable. So it's that's my problem with it, is that one, it's not individualized, two, it's not sustainable because it gives you starvation numbers or things that
Yeah,
are like not sustainable.
yeah,
We
no
should be
one would
eating
want to think
over
that.
2000. Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I feel like I cut you off. Can you repeat that?
Oh no, I was just saying that, like, I say, like, every adult should be eating over 2000 at least.
Yeah.
And being given less than that is just ridiculous.
I feel like I would be just a monster of a person if I only had 800. Like I would probably be one of the people on the subway who just like randomly yells at people. You're in the subway and it's just like the
Like, are
person
you hungry?
and that like, babe, you need some sustenance. Like you don't see my plate. Like, the Snickers commercial. If I only had 800 nobody, I could not be in the world with other people. Like
It's so true.
everyone would hate me. You also brought up children, which I think is really important. I have nieces and nephews, and I have so many friends who became pandemic moms. Everybody got pregnant. So, okay, I can't afford all this, guys. Um, a lot of people of my generation are kind of butting heads with what they know, have been taught, whatever, about proper nutrition for kids. And
Mhm.
conversations that I've had with several people, my family, outside of my family, we're all concerned about like the kids being overweight. How
Mhm.
exactly how do you create healthy relationships with food with children without giving them that negative, yeah, how do you enforce or encourage nutrition for kids without creating a negative relationship with food? I'm so
Mhm.
afraid of scarring my nieces or nephews in some way about their bodies because we're like, oh, I don't want her to, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's a scary thing, and I'm always just, like, cognizant of, like, you do have to teach kids limits, and, like, you know, you can't sit here and eat a whole box of Gushers, okay? Here's why, but you don't want to create that negative relationship with food. So what are just, like, some building blocks for how you can start that foundation with kids?
Mhm. Well, people also, I think, need to first realize it starts with themselves. Children watch us, um, and they learn from us. Like, yes, social media is a big part of that, but if you're constantly talking about needing to lose weight in front of your child, guess what? They're going to constantly grow up with that feeling, even if they are quote unquote fine, of feeling like they need to be doing something to themselves, right? So it's passed on. And I think probably the worst of it is if you tell, if you're constantly telling your child or a child, no matter what they're eating, just be careful. Like, like for my generation, I feel like maybe we're the same, where you're told, oh my gosh, like once on your lips, a lifetime on your hips. Like I remember hearing that. Also just, like watch the figure, like watch, everything like that. So we're constantly saying these things as harmless, as like jokes, but the thing is that it's very much internalized. And people don't realize that, eating disorders often are missed because we only think of emancipated, or sorry, not emancipated. And mix that. I'll just say super skinny, right? Because I'm having word issues, right? We just think of really, really thin, especially white, right? We think of those two things as eating disorders. And eating disorders, actually, like binge eating, is probably the most common. And anorexia as well, you can look any sort of way, but I think people often miss binge eating, and especially miss it in people of color. And also, a lot of times I think trans gender is also up there. So off, it's just like we really have to be careful. And I think that things that are said just like to be harmless or just in fun are often internalized, and people don't realize that. So, my point is that just to be really mindful of how you speak to children. Like, do you want them eating candy all day? No. You know what I mean? Like, is it going to be great for their teeth? No. But what you can say, instead of being like, oh my God, stop eating that, you're going to get fat, or you're going to do whatever, just be like, hey, like, okay, you can have that cookie or whatever, but maybe afterwards, let's try something else. Or just saying, you know what, like, how about instead of this, we're going to eat this now, right? And then we'll see what we can eat later on. Setting up those boundaries, but not associating it with, oh my God, you're going to gain so much weight. That's going to be so bad. Like that's the issue. Because kids need boundaries, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the whole point of parenting.
yeah,
But as far as like what the end result is, like, are you making them scared of weight gain? Like, and kids also, just like adults, come in all different sizes. So,
yeah, of course.
sometimes a kid is just going to be larger. Like, that doesn't mean it's bad. Um,
Right. And that's the thing, is like I'm trying so hard to move away from classifying things as like a good food or bad food,
mhm,
or and the thing too that I have started asking my nieces and nephews when I'm noticing, because of the pandemic and my family took it pretty seriously, we were really in the house and
mhm,
bored, and I kept being like, okay, this kid keeps eating. And I'm like, at this point, okay, are you hungry or do you just want to eat? Like, are you physically hungry or
mhm,
are you bored? Like,
mhm.
because I'm happy to get, to fix you, whatever, but are you hungry or do you just want to eat? And that's something I have to ask myself too quite often. But
Yeah, there's boredom eating. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Mhm,
because sometimes you just want a munch. Whatever. Um, Lastly, because I want to make sure that I give people that, because this is such a big topic, right? And I
mhm,
think there is, like we've said several times, a lot to learn and unlearn. Where should someone start? Because we're approaching that time of year where it's
mm,
about to be, the resolutions and the, oh, all of your holiday weight and blah 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 blah. For people who want to sidestep that and who want to practice mindful eating and who want to actually put nutrition first and actual wellness first, where does someone even start?
Mhm. I think it's just important to realize what the goals are. Like, there's nothing wrong with having goals, right? Like I said, even if it is a body goal, like, because I myself, like, one of my goals right now is just because to be like more flexible and to be, as far as like body, like loosening all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're, you have to notice if your goals are, I want to get to a size, whatever, that's where it kind of gets iffy, because it's just like, okay, but like, what are you doing to get to that size? Why do you think that size is the goal? So I think it's important to recognize what your goals are. And if they are, you know let's say it does happen, is it sustainable? So I think that it's just really important to, if you're doing that New Year's resolution, that's step one, right? And also just really trying to, because all of us, are pretty much on social media. It's so important to really diversify your feed, because oftentimes whenever we're talking about health and wellness, most people only follow folks who are just like all about dropping these pounds, doing this, and it's just like, how about following someone who has like, hey, like how to like work on your mental health, how to do because that like mental health is just as important to, how to, I don't know, like, or maybe just following a recipe page, something like that, where it's not just all how to drop, how to get snatched, how to do all of these things, where it's just like more diverse. So that's what I mean by diversify, because I think when you look at your social media, you realize, oh, I'm only following one type of thing. So it's, I think that's the biggest recommendation, because it's not going to happen overnight. I'm just going to say that right now. Like having this healthy relationship, especially with how we grew up, it's not going to happen overnight. So that's why it's baby steps, first realizing these things and then making small adjustments. So, mhm.
I think that's really Lord, the way that I still struggle with just recognizing that you don't have to just like cross the whole thing all in once, like sustainable change,
Yeah.
incremental kinds of things. I think also you touched on something that I really want to drive home a bit as well, which is individualizing, right?
Hmm.
Everything is not going to work for every literal body. And how can someone, to me, I would assume that getting an individual course of action for yourself comes from speaking with a professional. What are some other just recommendations for how people can kind of divest from the group think that is diet culture and that tells you do paleo, do this, do this, do this? How do
Hmm.
people begin to like individualize for themselves?
I think realizing, because a lot of folks have probably done so many diets in their life. And I always tell people, really think about your time on each one of them. Like, yes, you got results probably because, it's most of them, it's just really restricted. So yeah, you're probably going to see some results, but was it sustainable? Are you really going to put yourself through that again? Because when you think about it, it's a cycle, and if they worked, if they actually worked, and I'm not talking about, yes, I did actually lose like 5 pounds, but guess what? It didn't, people get frustrated because they regain that weight because it wasn't sustainable. That's why it's a cycle. So really think about putting yourself through that again, because I know it's tempting, especially now. Like I'm sure things are going to be discounted. Like all those apps are probably discounted now, right? So really think, okay, am I doing this again? Did it work the last time? What can I do differently? Like how did I feel? Think about the foods that you're being asked to restrict, especially if you do something like Whole 30 or whatever it is. Think about that. Especially if you come from like a background like where it's very carb heavy, right? Like I can't imagine like coming from, I don't know, an Italian heritage and being told not to eat pasta. Like
Oh my
what?
God. Yeah.
Like what? um or anything else, like even like Latinx culture being told not to eat like rice, you know what I mean? Like is that really sustainable? No. nor should it be. So it's just really important. That's when you talk about individualize, really think about that. Is that sustainable? No. Um, so that's I think that's like a really important step because it's very easy. Like I call it the honeymoon phase. When you first start a diet, you're like, this is fine. I can totally do this. Like I don't even miss bread, which is like a huge lie, right? Like I don't miss it. But the more you do it, the longer, you realize, oh, what am I doing? So really think about the individual aspects.
Definitely. I feel like that's what I keep trying to drive home to people on my platform as a whole. Like when it comes to wellness and the way we navigate life, what
Hmm.
works for somebody just really may not work for you because you come
Yeah.
from such an individual, you come from such a unique and special place already that you can't. I remember when I did Whole 30, I will never forget like leaving from an event and the
Hmm.
headache that I got. I felt like it was a migraine. Like I felt like I was gonna go blind. And I
Mm.
had to just like go somewhere and I'm like, I squinted looking at the menu, like, what can I eat? I can't eat anything. I don't even remember what I ended up doing, but I just felt like from that quote unquote detox hangover phase of it. I was just
Mhm.
like, Jesus Christ. Um, so I think, yeah, one of our goals in life should be like sustainable changes.
Mhm.
So if someone wants to work with you and start taking advantage of your amazing, very helpful, very comforting content, how should they go about contacting you? Where can they find you? What services do you offer? Plug yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, my website and Instagram and Twitter, all of it is the nutrition tea. Probably super easy to find. So everything's the nutrition tea. Um, Also, my email is the nutrition tea at Gmail. But you can also find me through my website. And I do like most of the stuff is definitely on Instagram. I think that's probably the most successful where I can give like tidbits. But one-on-one sessions I do offer. So we can talk about that also because of course everyone's goals might be different. And it will be through a what I like to call a weight inclusive, meaning whatever your goals are, I'm not concentrating on a number, I'm concentrating on the actual goal. So whether that is diabetes, heart disease, whatever it is, we're going to talk about that, not the weight, and see what happens. So, which is hard for some folks. So just a heads up, but that's kind of how I operate. But most of my content is definitely on Instagram.
Okay, and I'll definitely include links to everything so nobody like stop your car or anything, write anything down. I'll in the episode description. So thank you, Shauna, so much for speaking with us. It's such a big topic, and I was just like, how are we going to narrow this down to an hour? So I hope we covered everything because I got so many very like similar questions when I ask people, on Instagram, like, what would you like me to ask a nutritionist? And so
Hmm.
much of it was just about weight, and I'm like,
Mm,
I don't even
hmm.
know how I would even begin to just like ask this same question over and over. What food should I avoid? What things should I? And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's just not how this is going to work. So thank
right.
you so much for taking time. And I'm looking forward to working with you in 2022. I can't believe that that's a word that that's a sentence I said.
I know,
2022 is going to be
2022. Oh
here
my god.
in 5 minutes.
I'm still in 2020.
Oh my god, same. Like what was 21? Anyway, so thank you so much and I will talk soon and thank you for sharing with my audience and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty.